Well, we're getting closer to the day when your bees arrive. Now, honestly, they don't look quite this big when they turn up, but you never know. You get to love them just the same. It doesn't matter which hive you decide to put your bees in, from the flow hive all the way through to a top bar hive. It really isn't that crucial about what hive they're going to be in, but what is crucial is you're going to need some equipment to look after your ladies when they get here. So what you're going to need to do is get yourself some gloves, because bees like to sting, if you haven't figured that out yet. When you're working your hives, you're probably going to get stung. Best not to have your hands out in the open, and bee gloves have like a longer little gauntlet here. Of course, I'm assuming you could just go down the hardware store and get yourself a pair of red gloves, which I've used some red gloves when you have a problem that you need to keep everything sterilised. You can probably use the plastic ones, but if you're just working generally, just get yourself some nice leather bee gloves. They're nice and comfortable. Order them in the right size. These are my lovely wife's, so they're a bit small for me, so we're not going to put them on. But the ones that I could show you are grubby, because beekeeping, if nothing else, you get grubby. That's just how it is. So, number one, gloves are a good idea. I like to wear a whole suit. You can get a jacket, but a whole suit works for me, because when you're actually moving your ladies around, they're walking, and so they'll run up your leg and all sorts of stuff. But in your yard, you're not going to be moving anybody, so you might get away with just a jacket and some jeans on, which is fine. But the interesting thing with bee suits is there's a myriad to pick from. This one here has basically a vented suit, and so it's a bit thicker and a bit harder for the ladies to get through to sting you. There you could get a cotton suit, which is probably your cheapest option, and they're fine as long as you just remember to put a long sleeve shirt on underneath the jolly suit, and then you'll be fine. When it's 44 degrees down here, it's not really comfortable, but hell, they work good. They keep the bees out. The purpose of the exercise is to try and keep you relaxed so they can't get to you and sting you and make you get nervous. And after a while, you get more and more relaxed, and hell, it doesn't matter if you get stung anyway, because it just hurts, and move on to the next thing. The first time you get stung, though, it's a bit of a like, what the hell was that? And so you don't want your first bee sting to be up your nose. Just, perhaps on the end of your finger or your foot. Be careful if you need to go to do the restroom while you're working your bees. They're just as likely to sting you on your tallywhacker, but that's a whole other story for a different show. This is just from a local bee supply store down here in Oz. There's a myriad of them. You go online, they're everywhere. You bloom and do your head in. But I like this ones because they're just a little bit thicker, and you breathe a bit. The idea of this is there's basically a bit of padding between both the layers, so it's a little bit more than 3 mils. Because the bee's sting is about that long, about 3 to 4 mils long. So it can't get to you. It'll still try to attack you, but it can't. And if you're wondering why the bees are stinging you, it's because it's just their natural response. They're actually trying to protect, say you're working on the hive, and that's their home. And of course, nature is a wonderful thing, because they have got this beautiful thing that's called honey, which is nice and sweet and smells amazing. And of course, big bad bears, and I don't know, I'm guessing bears I was trying to think what the hell it would have been back in England, because they've obviously got to America from England and Europe. But anyway, bears in America love bloody eating bee honey, and I've seen some horrible shots of the bloody beehive throwing up the tree when the bears have ripped it apart to get the honey out. So anyway, so the point is, the bees do not know the difference between you as the beekeeper that's trying to look after them and an angry bear that just wants to rip their home apart and eat some honey. So just be aware that they're not necessarily trying to attack you, they're just defending their home. And after a while, they'll get to know who you are and get the smell, and you'll get relaxed, and they'll chill out, and they won't even know you're there after a bit until every now and then they'll get the shits up if the storm's coming or something's going on with the weather. Most bee suits that you'll find are white, and the idea is that the bees don't necessarily think you're such a threat if you're in a white suit for some reason. They associate darker colours with more like a bear or an intruder. Having said that, though, my lovely wife has a pink bee suit, and they don't seem to give a toss and don't sting her any more than me, except that she's wearing a flowery perfume, which brings me to another point. If you're a lovely lady and you're actually going to go out and work in your apiary, it's probably not the wisest idea to put flower-scented actual perfumes on. Deodorants seem to be fine as long as they're not a flower deodorant. Go for something that's just a little bit, not necessarily smelling like flowers, because, of course, everybody knows that what the bees want to eat are flowers. So if you happen to smell like a flower and you're there, well, they're opportunistic and they'll try to get to you. And then they'll get to you and then they'll go, hell, you got no nectar for me, and give you give you what for and give you a sting and say, ha! Then the next most important tool on your shopping list when you're getting all this organised, you should be able to get all this from the one website. You want to get yourself a Hive Tool. Now, I know you don't necessarily worry about this straight away, but well, you can operate a hive without a Hive Tool, but it's a pain in the bum. So put it on your shopping list, get one of these. I have a homemade one around here somewhere if you're really ingenious. Where did I put that? Oh, here we go. Here's a homemade one that I collected off of another bloke. It's not quite as ideal, but it'll work. Really all you got is a sharp end and a hook at the end to get the hives out. We'll show you about how to use a Hive Tool later on, but I'm just telling you what you need to be going to get shopping for. If you've got, a few resources, these are very handy. It's called a blooming hive rack. So you can sit that on the side of your hive, and when you're working, you can hang your frames on here and they don't have to sit in the dirt. That saves you a bit of aggravation. So that's a handy thing. And then the controversial conversation about queen excluders. My Lord, I tell you what, this is an interesting subject. There is a myriad of queen excluders to pick from. We've got like plastic ones like this. We've got metal ones like that. And there's a myriad of other sorts of designs that come along that are all kind of thing. The thing I've started with the plastic ones because they were cheap. But I would suggest if you're going to be just having one or two hives in your backyard, a metal one is probably the way to go, because at least you can clean the thing. And when you put it in your hive, it stays up the top and it maintains the bee space. But the problem we have now that we're in the international world and things are crazy, you got to make sure that this little gap here is right. Because I've had a few queen excluders that have come, well, mainly from Asian guys, because their bees are smaller. Their Asian bees are just, I don't know, about another, what the hell anyway. I don't know what the exact measurements are, but they're a smaller bee. And so their queen excluders are smaller. And so you just be a bit careful as to where they come from. Because otherwise, it's rather painful trying to make this a bigger gap. Kill. So you're going to put that there. Obviously, if you don't want to spend as much money on a metal one, you can get a plastic one. And that's fine as well. The other thing you need to get organised is you're going to need some frames to put the bees to work on. Now, they come in a myriad of options, of course they do. Like, everything in beekeeping, there's always choices. Personally, the way I've ended up is I like the old-fashioned, boring, jolly wooden frame with some wires on it and some wax foundation, because the ladies, when they're in the natural environment, they'll actually, once this becomes the brood nest, they actually like to make little tunnels and make little shortcuts across the way. And that sort of, I don't know, it just seems they build on it easier, they like it better, and it's just natural. But if that's not what you want to do, you can get a plastic liner that goes inside a bee frame. They're needing to be waxed because the bees won't work on it as well. Most of the people that use these in a brood box situation will nip the corners out so that the girls can sort of rizz around that way. If I was to give you any advice, I'd say get some wooden frames and some wax foundation for your brood box at the very least. Then, of course, the next thing you've got is the jolly all-plastic frame. It's just moulded and whoosh, it comes straight out of the factory. 10 to the dozen. This has actually got some wax on it. I don't know if you can actually see that, but they comes out of the factory waxed. There's some really cool one that I haven't got here, which is a Ceracell model, and they have changed this little hollow here to have little hexagons in there so you can, just so the bees can maintain a bit of more control over the hive beetles. We don't really have hive beetles too much here in South Australia, so yeah, anyway, they're no dearer, so why wouldn't you get some Ceracell frames, honestly? You might be wondering, when you find a swarm in a tree or the side of a house or whatever else, they don't actually need these frames to build on. They're pretty clever and they'll make a home wherever and do a good job. But the thing is, once you put a bee swarm or a nest or whatever you want to call this thing, once you put some bees in a box, all of a sudden they're considered livestock. And the rules for owning livestock means that an inspector has to be able to come along and inspect it if he needs to. If some, I don't know, God forbid, in Australia, if we happen to get what is that called? The Varroa Mite. Heavens above. Praise the Lord, we haven't got Varroa Mite down here in Oz yet. I think we're the only major country that hasn't got it. Everybody else has got it, but we've got other diseases. If there's an outbreak in your area, the inspector's got to come along and try and make sure that, it hasn't spread. So he needs to be able to have a look at each individual frame that the bees are working on and pull it out and look at it. Of course, the Persa guys, they're not out to destroy your hobby or do anything. They're actually just trying to support the whole thing and keep everybody safe. And they know what they're looking for. But you don't want them coming to your house and actually having to destroy your hive to make sure it's all right. And plus, it's illegal. What's more, if you have a hive with your name on it and you suddenly becomes a livestock, then it has to be like this. You have to have frames in there that they can look at, because, I don't know, I'm guessing they just destroy it if it's not possible to check it, because, So you don't want that. Just play by the rules. It's all good fun. What's more, it helps you too. And it gives you, going forward, it's amazing, because then you get to be able to actually pull a frame out and see what the bees are doing in there. Now, of course, while you're in the bee store and you're wandering around and you're overwhelmed by all the different bits and pieces, either actually physically in the bee shop or you're online in the bee store, doesn't really matter. There's a lot of stuff to pick from. These are just the super duper getting started basics. And here's a handy little thing you should get while you're there as well. It's just a little bee brush. It's actually thinner than your normal jolly banister broom, so the ladies don't get stuck in there. It's ideal for when you're putting your lids back on. You can just sweep the girls out the way like that, and you don't kill anybody. So, because you know what? Nobody likes to be a murderer. So that's basically all the shopping you're going to need to do before your bees arrive. I think I've got everything. But you know what? When you're in the shop, there's all sorts of other really cool shit you can probably put on your shopping list. This is the basics. Just helps you out. And if you're enjoying the show, well, heck, you can join our social club. For $10 on the Patreon, you can get your questions answered backwards and forwards, and we're going to have Q&A discussions. We're going to have a live feed every now and then. You can email me some questions. Heck, I don't know how much else you can get done for $10, but we'll see what happens. And of course, you might all be wondering, how do you actually get some bees? That's an interesting question right there. And there's a few different options, and tune in the next episode. We're going to show you or tell you how to get some bees. There's a few different ideas. And of course, another important aspect to think about is you've got to get registered and you've got to get organised for all the jolly biosecurity stuff. So tune into the next episode and find out how to get that sorted out.